The air in the sale yard was thick with the scent of dust, damp earth, and finality. It was a place of endings, where value was measured in muscle and bone, and sentiment was a currency no one accepted. On this blistering afternoon, under a sun that bleached the sky to a pale, unforgiving white, a life was valued at $3. Not a sack of feed, not a rusty bucket, but a living, breathing creature. He was a bull, once a titan of muscle and pride, now a broken heap of black hide and shattered bone lying in the corner of a holding pen. His name had been something strong, something farmers give to an animal of promise, but now he was just the casualty, a fall into a ravine, a badly broken leg, and a series of deep, ragged wounds that wept a slow, crimson story into the dirt. The farmer, a man named Gable, whose face was a roadmap of droughts and hard seasons, stood with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the suffering animal. He wasn't cruel. He was a man cornered by practicality. The vet had quoted a price that was more than the bull was worth healthy, with a chance of success so slim it was a ghost of a whisper. The only other option was a bullet, but then a voice, small and hesitant, cut through the low murmurs of the auction. "I'll take him." Every head turned. There, standing by the splintered fence, was Leo. A boy of 12, with eyes that seemed to hold a quiet, ancient sorrow and hands that were perpetually gentle, as if he were afraid of breaking the world. He clutched 3 crumpled dollar bills in his hand, a treasure saved from months of small chores. The auctioneer, a man used to loud bids and boisterous bravado, paused. "For what, son?" "For meat." Leo shook his head, his gaze locked on the bull's labored breathing. "To make him better." A wave of pity, mingled with disbelief, rippled through the small crowd. Gable himself let out a short, harsh breath that wasn't quite a laugh. He looked at the boy, then at the dying bull. It was a fool's errand, a waste of hope. He unlatched the gate. "He's yours, kid, for $3. His final ride is on you." The deal was done. A magnificent life, deemed worthless, was passed into the hands of a boy with nothing to offer but a heart that refused to believe in endings. The journey home was a silent, somber parade. Leo's father, a man of few words and deep furrows in his brow, drove the old farm truck, the cattle trailer rattling behind them like a skeletal cage. He hadn't said no, but his silence was a heavy blanket of disapproval. Inside the trailer, the bull, whom Leo had already decided to call Titan, lay on a thick bed of straw Leo had painstakingly arranged. Every bump in the road, every lurch of the truck, sent a tremor of agony through the animal's massive frame, and with each one, Leo, sitting in the passenger seat, flinched as if the pain were his own. He watched the familiar landscape roll by, the green fields, the sturdy fences, the distant blue hills, but saw none of it. His entire world had shrunk to the space inside that trailer, to the sound of shallow, ragged breaths, and the overwhelming responsibility he had just placed on his own small shoulders. When they finally arrived at their small farm, the real challenge began. How do you move 1,000 pounds of broken animal? His father, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire day, brought the tractor. Using straps and a low, careful winch, they managed to gently slide the makeshift sled of straw and bull out of the trailer and into the old, sheltered part of the barn, a space reserved for new mothers or the sick. It was clean, dry, and filled with the sweet, calming scent of aged hay, but it felt more like a hospice than a place of healing. Titan lay still, his great head resting on the straw, his eyes half closed, filmed over with a dullness that spoke of surrender. The wound on his flank was a terrifying map of purple and red, and his leg was bent at an angle that defied nature. Leo's mother stood at the entrance, her hand over her mouth. "Oh, Leo," she whispered, the words laced with a love so deep it ached. "What have you done?" It wasn't an accusation, but a question of pure, unadulterated concern. What had he done? He had spent his entire savings on a creature everyone else had thrown away. He had brought this mountain of suffering into their lives. For a moment, doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through his resolve. He looked at Titan's still form, at the sheer impossibility of the task ahead. The men at the auction, his father's silence, his mother's worried face, they all screamed the same thing. This was hopeless. But then, as he knelt in the straw beside the bull's head, Titan let out a low, shuddering sigh. A warm puff of air brushed against Leo's cheek. It was faint, a mere flicker of life, but it was there. And in that tiny exchange, a silent promise was made. Leo wouldn't give up. He would fight for this life, even if he was the only one who believed it was worth fighting for. That first night was a long, dark vigil, a descent into the very heart of despair. Leo refused to leave the barn. He sat on an overturned bucket, the air growing cold around him, a single lantern casting long, dancing shadows on the old wooden walls. The world outside went quiet, surrendering to the crickets and the distant cry of an owl. But inside the barn, the silence was heavy, punctuated only by the shallow, rattling breaths from the straw. Titan was fading. Leo could feel it, a palpable draining of energy from the space, as if the life force was seeping out of the bull and into the cold earth beneath him. He had tried to give him water, holding a bucket close to his mouth, but Titan's head was too heavy to lift. He had tried to clean the wound, but the slightest touch seemed to cause waves of silent agony. The local vet, Dr. Evans, a kind but pragmatic woman who had seen more than her share of farm tragedies, had come by at dusk at the quiet insistence of Leo's mother. She knelt beside the bull, her examination swift and gentle, her face grim in the lantern light. She checked his gums, listened to his heart, and looked at the mangled leg with an expert's eye. When she stood up, she placed a compassionate hand on Leo's shoulder. "Leo," she began, her voice soft but firm, "his leg is shattered in 3 places. That wound is deep, and infection is already setting in. He's in shock." She took a deep breath. "Son, you have a huge heart, the biggest I've ever seen. But sometimes, the kindest thing is to let go." She offered the final, merciful solution, an injection, a peaceful end to the suffering. Leo's father, standing in the doorway, nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a sad resignation. It was the sensible path, the logical one. But Leo, looking at the massive, broken creature before him, saw more than just a collection of injuries. He saw a flicker of the same loneliness he often felt, a silent plea to not be abandoned. "No," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper, but charged with a certainty that surprised everyone, including himself. "Not yet, please. Just give him until morning." Dr. Evans looked from the boy's fiercely determined face to the dying animal. She saw the logic, the medical facts, but she also saw something else, a bond, fragile and new, that defied explanation. She sighed, leaving a syringe of powerful antibiotics on a clean cloth. "If he makes it through the night, give him this. But Leo, don't expect a miracle." The truck's taillights disappeared down the lane, leaving Leo alone again in the vast, echoing darkness. The weight of her words settled on him. Don't expect a miracle. Hope felt like a fragile, foolish thing. He curled up in the hay near Titan's head, close enough to feel the faint warmth, and whispered into the night. "Just hold on," he pleaded. "Just until the sun comes up. You're not alone." And as the moon climbed high in the sky, the boy and the bull shared the same space, hovering between one world and the next, holding on to a single shared breath. As the first, pale fingers of dawn crept through the cracks in the barn wall, a profound stillness had fallen. For a terrifying moment, Leo thought he was too late. Titan's breathing had become so shallow it was almost imperceptible. His own heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum in the quiet of the morning. This was it, the moment of truth. He had asked for until morning, and morning was here. With trembling hands, he filled a small, clean bucket with fresh, cool water. He knelt down, his movements slow, deliberate, as if performing a sacred ritual. "Titan," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please." He dipped his fingers in the water and gently moistened the bull's dry, cracked lips. He did it again and again, a patient, rhythmic offering. He expected nothing. He was simply keeping his promise, staying with him until the end. And then, it happened. A flicker. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. The bull's tongue, thick and rough, emerged weakly and licked at the moisture on his own lips. Leo's breath caught in his throat. It was the smallest of signs, a twitch in the vast stillness of defeat. But to Leo, it was a thunderclap of hope. He scrambled for the shallow dish he'd set aside, pouring a small amount of water into it. He held it right under Titan's nose. The bull's nostrils flared, smelling the water. A long, agonizing minute passed. Then, with a groan that seemed to summon every last ounce of strength in his body, Titan shifted his immense head, just an inch, and lowered his mouth to the dish. The sound of him drinking, a soft, lapping noise, was the most beautiful sound Leo had ever heard. It was the sound of a choice, the choice to live. Bolstered by this impossible victory, Leo drew the antibiotics Dr. Evans had left into the syringe. His hands still shook, but now with adrenaline, not fear. He had watched the vet 100 times with their own livestock. He found a thick muscle in the bull's powerful neck, patted it gently, and administered the shot. Titan barely flinched. From that moment on, a new rhythm took hold in the barn. It was a rhythm of care, of slow, painstaking work. Twice a day, Leo would gently, meticulously, clean Titan's wounds with warm salt water. He would bring him fresh hay, picking out the softest, greenest stalks. He brought him buckets of water mixed with molasses for energy, holding it steady while the bull drank. He talked to him constantly, his voice a low, steady murmur against the backdrop of the farm's daily noises. He told Titan about his day at school, about the clouds in the sky, about the dreams he had. He didn't know if the bull understood the words, but he knew he understood the presence, the constancy, the unwavering companionship. The barn, once a place of impending death, was transforming. It was becoming a sanctuary, a womb of healing, shielded from the doubt of the outside world. And inside it, a boy and a bull, both broken in their own ways, were beginning to put the pieces back together. One shared breath, one sip of water, one quiet sunrise at a time. The days bled into weeks, each one marked by tiny, monumental victories. The first time Titan ate a handful of grain from Leo's palm, his rough tongue tickling the boy's skin. The first time his eyes, once dull and distant, followed Leo as he moved around the barn, a spark of recognition and trust igniting in their dark depths. The deep, ragged wound on his flank, once an angry crimson, began to shrink, the edges pulling together, a testament to Leo's relentless care. But the broken leg remained the great, unconquered mountain. It was set in a crude but effective splint that Leo and his father had fashioned from padded boards and thick leather straps, but the bull had yet to put any weight on it. He would shift and struggle, moving his massive body with his powerful front legs, but the hindquarter remained a dead weight, a constant, frustrating anchor. The village murmurings continued. They had moved from pity to a kind of morbid curiosity. People would slow their cars as they passed the farm, hoping for a glimpse of the $3 bull. It was a local legend in the making, but one still steeped in skepticism. They saw the boy, devoted and tireless, but they also saw the reality, a crippled animal that would never be whole. Have you ever poured your entire soul into something that everyone else told you was impossible? Have you ever held on to a sliver of light in a world determined to prove it was just a reflection of your own foolish hope? For Leo, this was his daily existence. He lived in that sliver of light. Then, one afternoon, 6 weeks after the auction, it happened. Leo was mucking out the stall, the rhythmic scrape of his shovel a familiar comfort. Titan was watching him, as he always did. Leo finished his work and turned, leaning on his shovel handle. "All right, big guy," he said softly. "All clean." As if in response, Titan let out a low grunt. He shifted his weight forward, planting his front hooves firmly in the fresh straw. He pushed, his muscles straining, the cords in his thick neck standing out like ropes. He was trying to stand. Leo held his breath, his heart frozen in his chest. "Don't push too hard," he thought. a silent plea. The bull groaned, a deep, guttural sound of immense effort. His back legs trembled. He pushed again, and then, with a lurch that was both clumsy and magnificent, he was up. He stood there, swaying, all 4 feet on the ground. His shattered leg, still in its splint, was held tentatively, bearing only a whisper of his weight, but it was touching the earth. He was standing. A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over Leo, so powerful it buckled his knees. He slid down the wall and just watched, tears streaming down his face, silent and hot. Titan stood for less than a minute before gently lowering himself back into the straw, exhausted but triumphant. It was enough. It was more than enough. From that day on, standing became part of their daily routine. First a minute, then 5, then 10. Leo would stand beside him, one hand resting on his broad back, whispering encouragement. A silent partner in the bull's monumental effort. The fence of impossibility was beginning to crack. The splint came off on a bright, crisp morning at the beginning of autumn. The air smelled of wood smoke and turning leaves. Dr. Evans came herself, this time not with a syringe of mercy, but with a toolbox and a look of quiet astonishment. She had been getting weekly updates from Leo's mother, each one more unbelievable than the last. But seeing him in person was something else entirely. Titan was no longer a casualty. His black coat shone with health, a testament to the good food and meticulous grooming. His eyes were clear and intelligent. He was still a bull with a limp, but he was a bull reborn. She ran her hands over the healed leg, her fingers probing the thick scar tissue and the solidness of the bone beneath. "I don't understand it," she murmured, shaking her head as she snipped the last of the leather straps. "By all accounts, this shouldn't have been possible. The bone should have healed crooked, if at all. He should have been permanently lame." She looked at Leo, who was stroking Titan's face, calming him. "It's your work, Leo. Constant care, low stress, and something else. Something I can't measure." When the last strap fell away, Titan took a hesitant step, then another. He walked with a noticeable limp, a permanent reminder of his brush with death, but he walked with a steady, confident rhythm. He carried his weight. He was whole. The small pen in the barn, once a sanctuary, was now starting to feel like a cage. Leo knew the next step had to be taken. It was time for Titan to feel the sun on his back and the earth beneath his feet. He opened the wide barn doors, and a rectangle of brilliant golden light flooded the space. Titan blinked, his great head lifted, sniffing the air. He was hesitant. The barn had been his entire world for months. The outside was a place of memory, of pain and falling. Leo didn't pull or push. He simply walked out into the sunlight and stood in the small, fenced-in pasture that bordered the barn. He waited. He trusted the bond they had built. After a long moment, Titan took a step forward, then another, his hooves meeting the soft grass with a quiet reverence. He walked out of the darkness and into the light, blinking in the sudden brightness. He took a deep breath, filling his massive lungs with the fresh autumn air, and let it out in a contented sigh. He was free. He began to explore his new small world, his limp a steady, rhythmic beat on the ground. He was a king reclaiming his kingdom. And as Leo watched, he realized the fence around the pasture wasn't just holding Titan in, it was a symbol of the barrier they had broken through together, the barrier of doubt, of logic, of what everyone believed was impossible. Word of the $3 bull's miraculous recovery spread like wildfire through the valley. What was once a story of pity became a legend of hope. People now drove by the farm not with morbid curiosity, but with a sense of wonder. They would see him in the pasture, a magnificent black giant with a gentle limp, often standing side by side with the boy who had saved him. The two were inseparable. They had their own language, a silent communication of gestures and trust. Leo could walk right up to Titan, lean his small frame against the bull's massive side, and Titan would stand perfectly still, a warm, solid presence. One afternoon, Mr. Gable, the farmer who had sold Titan for $3, pulled his truck over. He got out and walked slowly to the fence, his old, work-worn hands gripping the top rail. He just stood there for a long time, watching. Titan, who had been grazing peacefully, lifted his head and looked at the man. There was no fear, no anger, just a calm, steady gaze. Leo came out from the barn and stood beside Mr. Gable. They didn't speak for a few minutes, the only sound the rustle of leaves and Titan's soft chewing. I never would have believed it," Gable said finally, his voice thick with an emotion Leo had never heard from him before. He wasn't looking at Leo, but at the bull. "I saw a broken animal, a lost cause, a line item in a ledger book." He turned then, and his eyes, clear and filled with a profound sense of awe, met Leo's. "You saw him. You actually saw him." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He fumbled with the clasp and took out 3 crisp, new dollar bills. "Here," he said, holding them out to Leo. "This was never mine to take." Leo looked at the money, then back at the man's weathered face. He shook his head gently. "That's okay, Mr. Gable," he said. "He was worth every penny." A slow smile spread across Gable's face, softening the hard lines etched by years of struggle. He nodded, understanding completely. He wasn't just looking at a boy and a bull, he was looking at a miracle he had almost thrown away. He was witnessing the immeasurable value of a life that everyone, including himself, had written off. The encounter changed something in the community's perception. Titan was no longer just a survivor. He was becoming a symbol. He was a testament to the power of a single person's belief. He was the living, breathing embodiment of a second chance. And as the annual Village Harvest Festival approached, a quiet, radical idea began to form in Leo's mind, an idea that would once again test the boundaries of what everyone thought was possible. The Harvest Festival was the biggest event of the year, a celebration of community, hard work, and the bounty of the land. It featured pie-eating contests, handcrafted goods, and the much-anticipated parade of livestock, where farmers showed off their prize-winning cows, sheep, and horses. It was a parade of pedigree and perfection. When Leo went before the town council to ask if Titan could be in the parade, the room fell silent. The council members, sitting at a long table in the small town hall, exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Henderson, the council head, a man who valued tradition and order above all else, cleared his throat. "Son," he said, his tone patient but firm, "we appreciate your spirit. What you've done for that animal is remarkable, truly. But a bull, a full-grown bull in the middle of a parade with children and crowds? It's a safety hazard. It's just not done," the other members murmured in agreement. Bulls were symbols of power, of unpredictable strength. They belonged in reinforced pens, not walking down Main Street adorned with a ribbon. Leo had expected this. He had rehearsed his answer in his head 100 times. "He's different," Leo said, his voice quiet but steady. "He's not like other bulls. He's gentle. He wouldn't hurt anyone. I want people to see him, not as something to be afraid of, but as a friend." He spoke of their bond, of the trust they shared, of how Titan would stand perfectly still while Leo groomed him, how he would lower his head to be stroked. He wasn't just an animal, he was a partner. It was Dr. Evans who turned the tide. She had come to the meeting to support Leo. "I can vouch for the animal's temperament," she stated, her professional credibility filling the room. "I have never seen a bond like the one between this boy and this bull. The animal that was aggressive and territorial before his accident is gone. What remains is something else, something calm. Trust the boy," she urged them. "Trust the bull." The council deliberated. It was a risk. It flew in the face of all convention. But the story of the $3 bull had captured their hearts, and the image of the boy standing before them, so earnest and so brave, was impossible to deny. Reluctantly, they agreed. Titan could be in the parade, but on a short lead, with Leo at his side and Leo's father walking close behind. The test was set. Titan wasn't just going to be in a parade. He was going to walk into the heart of the community that had once dismissed him and prove what kind of animal he truly was. The day of the festival arrived, bright and buzzing with excitement. Main Street was lined with families, the air filled with the smells of popcorn and grilled onions, the sounds of laughter and music from the town band. Back at the farm, Leo was carefully brushing Titan's coat until it shone like polished jet. He wasn't decorating him with flashy ribbons or bells like the other animals. Instead, he wove a single, simple garland of autumn leaves and late-blooming wildflowers, and placed it gently around Titan's thick neck. "Ready, big guy?" Leo whispered, patting his side. Titan responded with a soft huff, his calm eyes blinking slowly. As they walked him into the staging area for the parade, a hush fell over the other farmers. They backed their prize heifers and polished horses away, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Titan was immense, a creature of pure, raw power, and his quiet limp only added to his mythic presence. But he walked with a serene dignity, his gaze soft, his attention focused entirely on the boy at his side. When it was their turn, Leo took a deep breath and led Titan onto the street. The crowd's cheerful chatter faltered, replaced by a wave of whispers. People instinctively pulled their children closer. They saw a bull, a threat, a danger. Leo's heart pounded. This was the moment. He kept his voice low and steady, a constant murmur of reassurance to his friend. Titan, sensing the tension, didn't balk. He didn't pull. He simply walked, his pace measured, his head held high, a gentle giant in a world that expected a monster. And then, the most extraordinary thing happened. A little girl, no older than 5, captivated by the flowers around the bull's neck, broke free from her mother's grasp. Before anyone could react, she ran right up to them, stopping just inches from Titan's massive head. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Leo's father tensed, ready to spring forward. But Leo just stood still, his hand resting on Titan's side, his trust absolute. Titan stopped walking. He lowered his great head, slowly, deliberately, until his wet nose was level with the little girl's face. She reached out a tiny hand and fearlessly touched his nose. Titan didn't move a muscle. He simply stood there, a mountain of quiet patience, and allowed her to. He let out a soft, warm breath that ruffled her hair. The little girl giggled, a sound of pure, innocent delight. The entire street was silent, witnessing this impossible, beautiful moment. Then, a single person began to clap. Then another, and another, until the entire street erupted in a wave of thunderous, emotional applause. They weren't clapping for a prize animal, they were clapping for a survivor. For a friendship that defied logic. For a boy who saw worth in the worthless. For a gentle giant who taught them that the greatest strength is not in power, but in peace. The parade was a turning point, not just for Titan, but for Leo. He had walked into that crowd as the quiet, outcast boy with the broken bull. He walked out a hero. He was no longer the boy who was too soft, too sensitive. His gentleness was now seen for what it was, a profound strength. His life, once small and solitary, opened up. Other kids didn't just talk to him. They looked up to him. They would come to the farm, not with fear, but with reverence, to see the legendary bull and hear the story from the boy who made it happen. Leo, in healing Titan, had healed something deep within himself. The loneliness that had shadowed him for so long began to recede, replaced by a quiet confidence. He had found his voice, not in speaking loudly, but in the steadfastness of his actions. Titan became the soul of the village. He was no longer the $3 bull. He was just Titan, their Titan. He lived out his days in peace and contentment, a beloved fixture in the pasture by the road, a living monument to hope. He was a daily reminder that broken things can be mended, that life persists against all odds, and that compassion has a power that logic can never measure. Years passed. Leo grew from a boy into a young man, but his bond with Titan never wavered. He would still go to the barn every morning and every evening, not out of duty, but out of love. He would lean against his old friend's warm, solid side, and they would watch the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The bull who was given up on, the boy who was underestimated, they had saved each other. Their story became a modern parable, told and retold in the valley, a lesson passed down to new generations. It was a story about the true meaning of value. It wasn't about the price of a thing, but its worth. It wasn't about physical perfection, but about the resilience of the spirit. What is the value of a life? Is it measured in dollars and cents, in strength and utility? Or is it measured in the love it inspires, the hope it creates, and the hearts it transforms? The story of Leo and Titan answers that question without a single word. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound miracles don't come from a grand, divine intervention, but from the simple, unwavering kindness of a gentle heart, refusing to give up on a life that everyone else had already thrown away.